Let me begin with a truth that is uncomfortable but necessary. Your mood has no obligation to your future. Your feelings wake up every morning without responsibility. They do not care about your goals, your potential, or the life you said you wanted. Your mood is reactive. It responds to weather, words, memories, fatigue, and yet too many people hand it the steering wheel. A plan, on the other hand, is an act of intellect. A plan is born in clarity. A plan is created when you are thinking, not reacting. And the highest form of self-respect is honoring the decisions you made when you were thinking clearly. Here is the psychological reality. The brain seeks comfort before it seeks growth. The mind will always negotiate with you when discipline is required. It will say, not today. It will say, you deserve a break. It will say, wait until you feel ready. But readiness is a feeling, and feelings are unreliable witnesses. If success depended on motivation, very few people would succeed. Motivation is emotional currency. It inflates and crashes. Discipline, however, is stable. Discipline shows up when motivation is absent. Discipline is the bridge between intention and achievement. Think about this. Every meaningful outcome in your life, education, skill, character, trust, was built through repetition, not enthusiasm. You did not become who you are on your best days. You became who you are on the days you didn't feel like it and acted anyway. This is where philosophy meets responsibility. A human being is not defined by impulse, but by choice. Freedom is not doing what you feel. It is doing what aligns with your values, despite how you feel. When you follow your mood, you are a passenger. When you follow your plan, you are an architect. A plan is a promise you make to your future self. And breaking that promise repeatedly does something dangerous. It erodes trust with yourself. Once that trust is gone, confidence collapses, doubt moves in, and then potential becomes regret. But when you follow your plan, even imperfectly, you build internal credibility. You start believing your own word. And when a person believes themselves, they become unstoppable. Understand this: the world does not reward intention, it rewards execution. And execution does not require inspiration. It requires obedience to the plan. So when your mood says rest, but your plan says work, listen to the plan. When your mood says quit, but your plan says endure, listen to the plan. When your mood says fear, but your plan says grow, listen to the plan, because moods change, plans shape lives, and in the end, success is not about how you feel on the journey. It is about whether you honored the discipline required to arrive. Follow your plan. Your future is counting on it. Discipline is a decision, not an emotion, and that distinction changes everything about how a person lives. Emotions are spontaneous. They arise without permission and disappear without explanation. They are shaped by sleep, stress, praise, rejection, and memory. Discipline, however, is intentional. It is a conscious agreement you make with yourself about how you will act, regardless of how you feel. When a person waits to feel disciplined, they misunderstand the nature of growth. Discipline does not arrive as a feeling. It arrives as a choice, repeated long enough to become character. Most people believe that successful lives are built on moments of inspiration. In reality, they are built on structure. Structure is what remains when motivation fades. It is what carries you forward when enthusiasm expires. Anyone can act when emotions are favorable. That requires no strength. Strength is revealed when action continues in the absence of emotional support. That is where discipline lives, not in excitement, but in commitment. From a psychological standpoint, the brain prioritizes comfort and energy conservation. Left unmanaged, it will always resist effort and seek ease. Discipline is the counterforce to that instinct. It is the voice of reason overriding impulse. It is logic telling emotion, I hear you, but you do not decide. When discipline becomes habitual, it frees the mind from constant negotiation. There is no debate, no inner argument. There is only execution. Great lives are not accidental. They are designed. They are governed by routines, standards, and principles that operate independently of mood. A person who relies on emotion is constantly starting over. A person who relies on discipline is always progressing, even on slow days. Over time, this consistency compounds into mastery, confidence, and self-respect. The most powerful outcome of discipline is not external success, but internal alignment. When your actions consistently match your values, you develop trust in yourself. That trust becomes identity. You no longer ask whether you will show up, you know you will. And once discipline becomes who you are, not something you attempt, your life stops being reactive and starts becoming intentional. Moods are temporary by nature, yet they are often treated as permanent authorities. They arrive unannounced, influenced by circumstances beyond your control, and they leave just as unpredictably. Facing decisions on something so unstable is like building a house on moving ground. A mood does not evaluate long-term consequences, it reacts to the present moment. It is shaped by fatigue, disappointment, excitement, fear, or comfort. When you allow it to guide your actions, you surrender your future to whatever emotional weather happens to pass through your mind that day. A plan, however, is created in a moment of clarity. It is designed when reason is active and perspective is intact. It considers where you are, where you want to go, and what must be done consistently to bridge that distance. A plan is anchored in purpose, not reaction. That is why it deserves authority over your behavior. It represents your highest thinking, not your most fleeting feeling. Psychologically, the mind seeks immediate relief before long-term reward. This is why moods often argue against effort. They exaggerate discomfort and minimize potential. They convince you that postponement is harmless and that tomorrow will be more cooperative. But tomorrow is governed by the same mind, the same tendencies, and the same resistance. When you obey a mood, you reinforce its power. When you override it with a plan, you weaken its influence. Following your plan does not require emotional alignment. It requires trust in your prior judgment. It is an act of maturity to honor decisions made when you are not emotionally compromised. Each time you act according to plan despite resistance, you strengthen neural pathways associated with self-control and resilience. Over time, your moods lose their dominance because they are no longer rewarded with compliance. A person guided by mood lives reactively, constantly adjusting to internal fluctuations. A person guided by plan lives deliberately, grounded in intention. The difference between stagnation and progress often comes down to this single distinction: whether you allow temporary feelings to overrule permanent goals. Consistency is often misunderstood because it lacks drama. It does not announce itself with intensity or spectacle, yet it quietly outperforms every burst of motivation over time. Intensity is emotional, it surges, burns bright, and fades just as quickly. Consistency is behavioral, it is steady, methodical, and patient. While intensity makes you feel powerful in the moment, consistency makes you powerful in reality. The human mind is easily impressed by extremes, but progress is built through repetition. Psychologically, the brain adapts through frequency, not force. Neural pathways strengthen when actions are repeated, not when they are performed with enthusiasm. This is why habits shape identity. What you do occasional. Lie reflects desire. What you do daily reflects character. Small actions, when repeated consistently, bypass resistance because they feel manageable. Over time, those actions accumulate into skills, knowledge, and confidence that intensity alone can never sustain. Many people wait for the perfect surge of energy before they begin. They confuse readiness with momentum. But momentum is created after movement, not before it. A person who commits to small, consistent effort trains the mind to associate action with normalcy rather than struggle. This reduces psychological friction. The task no longer feels heroic, it feels expected. And what is expected gets done. Consistency also protects you from emotional volatility. On high energy days, it keeps you grounded. On low energy days, it keeps you moving. It removes decision fatigue because the question is no longer whether you will act, but simply when and how. This reliability creates trust within yourself, and trust is the foundation of confidence. Over time, consistency reshapes your self-image. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries and start seeing yourself as someone who follows through. This shift is profound. The world responds differently to people who are predictable in their effort and reliable in their execution. Opportunities align with those who show up repeatedly, not occasionally. Intensity may impress others, but consistency transforms you. It turns ordinary days into extraordinary outcomes and makes progress inevitable rather than optional. Self-respect is not a feeling you wait to receive. It is a condition you earn through alignment. It emerges when your actions reflect your values consistently, not when your circumstances are ideal. Many people search for confidence as if it is something external, something granted by achievement, recognition, or approval. In truth, confidence is the byproduct. Integrity with oneself. When what you believe and what you do begin to match, self-respect naturally follows. Emotions are persuasive, but they are not principled. They fluctuate based on comfort, fear, or convenience. Values, however, are stable. They represent who you have decided to be regardless of circumstance. When action is guided by emotion, behavior becomes inconsistent, and inconsistency fractures self-trust. Each time you act against your values in favor of temporary comfort, you send a subtle message to yourself that your standards are negotiable. Over time, this erodes self-respect more deeply than failure ever could. Psychologically, the mind is always observing your behavior. It records evidence. When you consistently act in accordance with your values, you build internal credibility. You become someone you can rely on. This reliability strengthens identity. You no longer need external validation because your sense of worth is internally regulated. You know who you are because your behavior confirms it. Following values over feelings requires courage. It often demands discomfort, delay, and discipline. But discomfort endured in alignment produces dignity, while comfort pursued in contradiction produces regret. The pain of discipline is sharp but brief. The pain of self-betrayal is quiet and long-lasting. One builds strength, the other builds doubt. As actions align with values, emotional stability increases. You become less reactive because your decisions are no longer negotiated daily. There is clarity in knowing where you stand. This clarity simplifies life. Choices become easier, boundaries become firmer, and direction becomes unmistakable. Ultimately, self-respect is not about perfection, it is about consistency. It is about showing up as the person you said you would be, even when no one is watching. When values lead and emotions follow, character solidifies. Once character is established, confidence is no longer something you chase, it is something you embody. Mastery of the self is the highest form of power a person can possess because it governs every other achievement. External success without internal control is unstable. It collapses under pressure. True mastery begins when reason is given authority over impulse, when the thinking mind leads and emotion is no longer in command. Emotions are informative, but they are not qualified to decide direction. They report experience, not strategy. From a philosophical perspective, self-mastery is the ability to act according to principle rather than reaction. It is the discipline to pause, evaluate, and choose deliberately. This does not mean suppressing emotion, but subordinating it to reason. When reason leads, emotion becomes an assistant rather than an obstacle. It provides energy without determining course. This balance is what separates maturity from impulse. Psychologically, impulse is fast and automatic. It is rooted in survival mechanisms designed for immediate response. Reason is slower, more deliberate, and future-oriented. Developing mastery means strengthening the capacity to tolerate delay, discomfort, and uncertainty without surrendering control. Each time you act rationally instead of reactively, you reinforce neural circuits associated with executive function and emotional regulation. Over time, this becomes your default state. When emotion leads, life becomes chaotic. Decisions are inconsistent, priorities shift, and progress fragments. When reason leads, behavior stabilizes. You become predictable in the best sense of the word, reliable, grounded, and composed. This stability creates momentum because energy is no longer wasted on inner conflict. There is alignment between thought and action. Self-mastery also produces freedom. Paradoxically, structure liberates. When impulses no longer dictate behavior, you are free from regret, compulsion, and constant correction. You act with intention rather than apology. This freedom is not loud or dramatic, it is quiet and powerful. As reason takes the lead, emotions begin to follow naturally. Confidence grows not from dominance over others, but from command over oneself. You stop being ruled by circumstance and start shaping it. This is the foundation of leadership, excellence, and lasting fulfillment. When the mind governs and the emotions support, a person becomes not only effective, but formidable.